So for everybody that locked in the news, Super Jeanne actually having the Angel Megatron in her, I guess, kit or possession, or we'll find out as the story goes on, you were correct, as we now actually have literally Megatron Jeanne over here. And I'm pretty gassed about this character. All of the animations are pretty cute, especially for the second ascension, but how is the unit herself? Well, she's interesting. I know we always rag on quick AoE characters when they come out because, well, they're relying on like having Ruler Scotty, and ideally you also want to have Caster Scotty for a maximum quick refund and stuff. But Buster AoE servants I think are also under the eye of scrutiny because we have so many powerful Buster AoE characters like Arjuna, Alter, and Kukulkan that a lot of them can feel like they kind of get pushed out of the meta because it's like, oh, not dealing a octomobillion damage? Worse than Kukulkan, I've seen enough, right? That's kind of like the initial reaction. And this Megatron Jeanne was kind of my initial thought in that aspect, but in some ways, I do feel like this character is doing some interesting thing. Because at the very least, she is playing into the niche of the Buster meta, and that is skill cooldown. But obviously, more and more of that will be explained as we go through this video, so as per usual, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you like being informed on all things going on both the NA and JP side of the games, and let's just start diving into her kit, starting off with her hits, of which she's rocking a very appropriate balance kit. Double Buster, double Arts, one quick card with a nice clean 0.53% NP gain and decent hits on all of her cards. 5 on the quick, 4 on the Arts, 4 on the Buster, and you know I gotta love seeing the 5-hit extra attack, which if you're not in the know is a composite card that gen stars NP and does big boy damage. 5 hits is the general golden rule we like to see over here at ZTL Industries, but it is just kind of shockingly balanced. Like, her NP refund isn't going to be the craziest, but it's also not going to be bad, and she can still have room to do some decent Buster crits with a double Buster card. I do want to highlight her passive skills next to her hits, though, because these are all quite good. She's got 30% innate mental debuff resistance, meaning that is a debuff chance against getting skill sealed, charmed, stunned, put to sleep, stuff along those lines. She's also got a passive 12% crit buff, which makes her crits bite just a little bit harder, and then she's providing 5 stars and 5% NP to herself every single turn for absolutely free, and then she kind of has something reminiscent of Koyenskaya with 8% passive NP damage. It's not like Koyen Light's 20%, but it is still a nice little damage buff that she will always have active. As far as passive skills are concerned, these are fairly good. Like, these are not all that bad. I would also like to highlight that her third append skill gives her anti-ruler damage, so if you are in need of somebody to take down rulers, she will be a little bit better going into that, but we'll talk about that more as we go through her kit. So let's start diving into her proper skills, starting off with skill 1 over here, which is a pretty good just all-around utility skill, giving her 100% buff removal resistance for 3 turns, which is absolutely nutty. You guys have seen all the different bosses we have to fight that can just remove your buffs on their NP, or they have some random skill, or on a break bar they yeet all of your buffs off of your characters. Being able to protect yourself and ensure that you're always going to have your buffs is always going to be strong. Then on top of the mental debuff resistance on her passive skills over there, her first skill gives her 3 instances of debuff immunity 3 times for 3 turns. She also has her own survivability with 3 hits of evasion that last for 3 turns, and of course Buster AoE character, so you know she's rocking that 50% battery. All in all, this does a lot to kind of set this character up. You see the 50% battery, you assume, okay, she's going to be able to do Buster looping. Now you may be looking at the 7-turn cooldown and saying, well, ZTL, is she going to be able to do Buster looping? Because the general rule of thumb is that you want a 6-turn cooldown on your battery if you want to actually do Buster looping, and don't worry, we do have something for that in her kit. But then all of the other effects are very strong going into any type of challenge quest. I mean, innately, her being a ruler means that she's always going to be pretty well positioned going into those because she resists most damage from most enemies in the game. So then on top of that, being able to have her own survivability separate from something like, say, a Merlin survivability, or I guess if you want to toss her in like the Immortal Team Comp from Castoria's own survivability, it just sets her up to be looking rather nice. It lets her do Buster looping, but then also really sets her up with effects that things like Merlin and your Castorias, your Koyenskayas, these other support characters for Buster that you want to use aren't going to be offering her. And again, yeah, I do know about the meme about saying that like, oh, Castoria and the Buster team, but hey, Immortal Team Comp is still the Immortal Team Comp. But now moving into her second skill, she's going to reduce the party's skill cooldown by 1, gain 15 stars every turn for 3 turns, and then bomb 15 stars on an 8-turn cooldown. This is why she's able to do Buster Looping on the first skill, because you can make that 7-turn cooldown a 6-turn cooldown, and then start slapping in all of the Koi and Skya buffs, and then you can, re-loop your skills and all that good stuff. And then we also have the append skill that does reduce your skill cooldown as well, but I think reducing the parties, I don't think this has any immediate broken use that I can really see in the current farming strategies, but it is still rather good for her because it lets her slide into those Buster farming teams, but then might also have some utility going into boss fights if you need to get, say, Merlin's illusion skill back up, or to get hero creation back online, or again, if you're using Castoria in this Buster team because you just want her for the immortality, getting access to her skills again for the added NP gain, attack, just any one of the myriad of broken effects that Castoria is doing, it's always going to be rather strong, and it does ensure that not only can you start off by doing some nice crits because you can just drop the 15 stars, but that you'll always have stars in a rotation because she's genning 20 stars in total with this skill, because remember, passive's giving you an additional 5 stars every single turn, but then you also have Merlin giving, 5 stars on his NP, you have things like 20-30 giving 8-10, you have a lot of ways to ensure that this character always has stars, so they're always going to be critting, which is going to be very important for them, because I do think that their NP damage is a little bit low. They don't really hit all that hard from some of my initial testing, so having the fallback crits is always going to be very nice. And then finally, there's her third skill. This is just her offense skill. It gives her 30% attack for 3 turns, 50% crit damage for 3 turns, and she pierces invincibility for 3 turns on a 6-turn cooldown. Just really good effects. Like, everything here is solid. Attack is attack. You're doing more damage. Awesome. Crit damage, you're doing some pretty decent crit damage. They could have shafted her a lot by just giving her like 30% or 40%, so love to see the 50% standard on there. And then the pierce invincibility is a nice little added bit of tech that they decided to put on her. So that does mean that if you're going into bosses that are going to be spamming dodges or invul buffs, you're going to be able to always get around them when you have this skill up, which is very nice because a lot of DPSs can really start to lag behind if the boss kind of outstuns them or outlocks them with their own defensive buffs from being able to really take them down. So all in all, very balanced kit. Nothing super innately crazy going on here. I mean, the most eye-popping thing probably is the party skill cooldown reduction, but realistically, that's probably just there to make sure that Jeanne herself can get the cooldown on her first skill so she can do stuff like Buster looping. So just a very balanced character overall, and that even applies to her NP over here. It's doing a lot, but it's doing a lot of very balanced things, giving her a 50% power mod against both good and evil aligned enemies, healing the party's HP by 2,000 whenever she fires this NP, giving everybody in the party 10% NP gauge, and then increasing her own NP damage by 20% before she does damage. Again, the reason that I say that this is actually fairly balanced is nothing here is innately broken. These are all really good effects, but it definitely, could have been made more broken. Those power mods could have been like 100% to 150%. She could have stacked the NP damage so she does more damage every single turn, because if you stack for 3 turns, then she could get 60% NP damage and pair it even more nicely with Oberon. But they went really balanced with her, right? Like, I think she'll be pretty solid going into some CQ fights because she's offering healing, a little bit of extra consistency with the party's NP gauge. She herself is very self-sufficient in being able to make sure that she's not going to get blown out by anybody, and that all of your skills are going to be relatively low on their cooldown with her and Koi and Skya, because keep in mind, you could always pop Jeanne's second skill, then have a Koi and Skya use their skills on her, and then that gets her own skill cooldown skill back on cooldown, like, even faster, right? Like, I know that's a lot to kind of like process, but this character is pretty fine. Like, I don't think they're innately broken or anything. They're not really doing anything that's all that crazy, and it's not like their damage is just monstrously power creeping every other like Buster AoE character that came before them. This is like a very balanced character. They don't really do anything the best, but they don't really do anything all that bad either, which I guess is kind of in line for what we're able to kind of ascertain from the current story going on JP right now. And it's kind of what I would expect for a servant that is using Megatron, right? Like Megatron being an angel that is like, not to go into too much lore here, but in some things called like a great archivist, or kind of like knows just a lot of things about everybody. So if she has that, the fact that she's very well positioned for all forms of content, I do think is rather fitting. Like, her damage is never going to be the best, but she's always going to be able to do some decent damage. She has pretty good power mods. Good and evil is a lot of enemies in the game. They can't really be stopped by defensive effects, effects, and they can't have their own offensive and defensive effects taken away from them by the enemy, and then they have a little bit of extra niche utility with that second skill. Like, this character is not all that bad, but they're not so good that if you're interested in definitely not Lilith over there, that you should immediately dump all of your Saint Quartz into this character and not wait to see what Lilith does, especially because I think they announced that there's going to be a third banner, so I'm expecting Jeanne to be this little appetizer. Lilith will probably be a little bit more expressly broken, and then whoever the third round is, I don't know, maybe it'll be like Oberon 2, but specifically for quick characters. Who knows? Now, I personally did dump everything into this banner because I'm a huge Jeanne fan. I mean, Jeanne is pretty much the entire reason that I got into the Fate franchise, and Jelter is why I got into FGO, so I almost feel obligated to go summon for this character, and I probably will continue to dump things into the banner, but that doesn't mean that you yourself have to do that. She's a very neat little character to use, but is she necessary? I don't think so. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. What do you think of this new Jeanne servant, this new Megatron Jeanne over here, as it were? Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and peep all those links down in the description down below. But with all that being said, Thor is banging on my windows outside, so I'm going to make sure my house doesn't get blown away. I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace, late guys.